I am excited today because this is someone that I have actually connected with because of my personal brand. So it's been great to be able to schedule this and have a conversation about all things personal branding, content creation, and nerd out a little bit about what he does as well as a profession, because I share some of those same background myself. So this is the owner, founder of Find It Tech, Mark Szymanski. Mark, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, thank you so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. One thing I noticed in your main video is you had a quote here about a passion for creating content. And you said, what you like to do is learn, try, and share everything you do, which I think is just the encapsulation of what a personal brand really is. So, can you kind of walk me through what that mindset is? How did you establish that mindset? How did you come to have that as kind of a motto? And then how has that been kind of translating that motto into actually creating content, for your audiences?
The learn, try, share, like kind of life motto that I don't know when I actually came up with that, but to give a little bit of a background in like coming out of college, I'm 28 now. So coming out of college in like, I can't remember at this point, like 2018, I had a job 9 to 5, I was doing all that sort of stuff. Learning a lot. Like I'm just like an avid learner, especially once I got out of school and into the real world. You learn so much. So I was learning a ton, and I started to dabble with entrepreneurship, website stuff, things like that. Started the business in 2018, and just throughout that time, I just naturally kind of discovered that about myself, where I like to learn things. I don't know how to build a website, so I naturally, I went on YouTube and I figured out all the things on how to build WordPress websites. And as I kind of put those pieces together, I I like to learn it, and then I try it for myself, and then I share with other people. And the idea being that I feel like I don't want to call it necessarily a gift, but I feel like one of the things that I'm good at is taking more complex things that like people would look at and be like, I don't know what they're talking about, like from an expert in website building or what have you. And I'm able to like kind of ask critical, like probing questions from a more of a beginner's perspective or an intermediate's perspective, and then just kind of translate really. If somebody knows something really well, they're a lot of times they're going to talk in the language in which they talk to their colleagues all the
Right.
time, but that doesn't always translate really well to a beginner or somebody that's trying to make an agency or something like that. And that's just, I feel like, where that's kind of all stemmed from. Is so I'm kind of that conduit a lot of times between learning a new skill or or a plugin or platform or whatever, trying it for myself, telling, and in that phase, it's also like vetting it a little bit, reviewing it. Like this could be better. This is really good. This could be better, whatever. Maybe that, also goes back the other way to the developer or what have you. And then ultimately sharing that with my audience or anybody that really wants to listen, honestly. Just because I feel like that's it's a valuable, kind of ladder of steps there. And it's, I don't know. I just do it with everything. I've niched down. I've had to niche down a little bit more into the website stuff, but I used to do with literally everything. And
Well, let's
yeah,
explore
it's
that
just
actually.
I really enjoy it. It just speaks to me.
Let's explore that because you said you niched down. What was I know this is a hard issue with a lot of people is that they do have so many passions and that it's hard for them to find what is it that they actually should be focused on. You are focused on website development, WordPress development, and all that. Were you in an area where you kind of were multi-passionate and you were like, well, I could do this, I could do that? What was that process for you to finally decide, okay, I'm sticking with website development?
Yeah, again, I still fancy myself as pretty young, at least in the WordPress space, because it seems like everybody's been around for a little longer than I am. But like just in general, I know there's like a ton of like young people just doing crazy stuff nowadays, like having massive success, and I look to them for inspiration. But if you think about it on a scale of like a like more of a traditional trajectory, like going to college from 18 to 22, getting out, getting a little feel of like the corporate environment, everything. Um, the way that it really kind of like all happened was that I had that corporate experience, and I realized that I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to get out of that a little bit. And then I started trying everything, like, try everything in your 20s. I was like listening to, Gary V, like,
Yeah.
when, at his peak and everything like that. So it was like, your 20s are for doing crazy stuff. I didn't go like super crazy, but like I was trying a lot of things. So if you actually look back on, probably not my YouTube channel, because I've kind of pruned that specific to what I'm trying to do now. But if you look back on Instagram and other things, I haven't really deleted a lot of the stuff. You would see that I've gone through the gamut of things. The first thing that I did was I took the Gary Vee method of like, oh, I'm going to have a bunch of companies and I'm going to have like a parent company. So I like made a company. Actually, this is a funny story. I made a company called my name, Mark Joseph Szymanski. And that was, don't ever do that, please. I mean, if you make a company your name, it's just really confusing.
That's
That's
taking
just
the
an
personal
aside.
brand thing to the next level where it's literally you
Exactly.
LLC there.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's not a terrible idea, but it does get really confusing really fast. So when you walk into a bank and it's not fun. But anyway, learn from my mistake there. So I changed that and it's MJS Industries. So that's just like, again, I was a young kid. I still appreciate a lot of the advice, but it was Gary Vee, like VaynerX. He had all these things.
Yeah.
It's a terrible idea looking back on it because you can't do all these things at once. But the structure, though, not bad. So I had MJS Industries as my parent company, and then I owned, I set up like 4 or 5 LLCs for massively different things, like Szymanski Media for my personal brand, Find It Tech for web development, Fueled by Progress was going to be like a podcast, and I was listening to Joe Rogan. I wanted to do that. I wanted to make. I was watching people like Max Tuning and stuff like that in the fitness space. I wanted to make clothing and all that. So like all this crazy stuff. AM and the PM was like a company for me and my my girlfriend at the time, wife now, to have like a podcast, like just crazy stuff. Like and then some other real estate stuff because everybody was getting into real estate, right? So my point being in all that to kind of concisely answer the question here is I was so spread out. I was actually doing like multiple podcasts per week for those 2 that I said there. I was trying to build websites. I was trying to make random videos when we were, renovating our house on my personal brand, like just really, really wide.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would say probably 2 years ago at this point, I was like, okay, I need to stop doing all that stuff because you can't, I think of it like building a city and like you can't build like 5 skyscrapers all at one time. There's actually a better example. I think I don't know if it came from Sam Evans or there's like this graphic where it's like a circle in the middle. And then if you take like 1-inch arrows around it versus like having like one like 10-inch arrow basically is that,
Mm-hmm.
describing it poorly. But the idea is like if you consolidate your energy into one thing, you're gonna be better off, and then you can spin off and do other things because you'll have more resources and all that.
Yeah.
So I say all that to say that was my trajectory specifically, and now I'm much more specific too. I'm still a little spread out with like kind of the personal brand stuff and the Find a Tech stuff, but it's way more consolidated and it's all revolving around the mainly WordPress, web development, and the business of all that. Just the content and the things that I'm doing there, as well as some client
And
work, obviously. So
how did you land on that? Like, how did you take all those passions and interests, and then because that seems to be the biggest holdup with everyone is like,
yeah.
how can I niche down when I also love doing this, that, and the third? Or what was kind of the
Yeah.
final decision? What was the equation in your head to finally decide website development?
I'm still not the most I'm still not the best at this because I still haven't even niched within the website space per se, like with what we're developing. But to answer your question on what I decided ultimately the route, not necessarily the niche of the website stuff, but the route that I wanted to go was pretty much purely based on the fact that the website prong of all that stuff that apparatus that I laid out was the thing that was showing me the most ROI of my time because I was making websites for people. I was getting paid. Like I was making those podcast episodes. I was trying to make clothing. Like that wasn't it was making no money. So that's like a simple cop out way almost, but it does make sense. I mean, why would you lean into something that's not making money unless you really, 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 really love it? I love building websites. I still do. I love the whole atmosphere of it, the whole entire ecosystem that goes around it. So to me, it was just like that is the proof of concept is there. Other people are doing it. I'm making money from it. That's where I'm going to go first. And then I always say, like, maybe one day I will bring Fuel by Progress back because it's still a passion of mine. It's something that I want to do.
Yeah.
It's another one of those life mottos that really speak to me. Like, I'm fueled by progress. But at the same time, there's that's kind of how I got there. Was just mainly it's a thing that's kind of working right now. So let's lean into that
Sure.
first.
Yeah, that's the toughest part I feel like when it comes to niching down too is like there's something I'm really passionate about, but is it helping me pay the bills right now? And then there's things that I'm like I'm somewhat passionate about, but I'm getting paid a lot for. So I kind
Yeah.
of feel as though I'm going to enjoy this a little bit more if it's bringing me money and I'm seeing progress versus something that I'm enjoying, but maybe it's not necessarily. I then have to get another separate job in order to pay the bills. So
Mhm.
I think at the end of the day, kind of the equation there is like, do the thing that seems to be getting traction, and then you'll have time and energy to spin off and do the other passions in the future, or maybe even just kind of like you reach the Gary V's and the Alex Hormozis of the world, where everything they do ends up being kind of part of their brand, but they had to kind of niche down at first in order to get to that point.
Right. Yeah. The one other thing that I would say real quick about that too is not just that it was working, but at least for me, and this isn't the same for everyone because of your interests, but out of those ones, like if I learned how to market and build websites, and like those skills are extremely like globally
Mm.
applicable. So like if I get really good at this vertical of this, then I can spin that off easier into like a personal brand because I'll know how to build websites, I'll know how to market, I'll know how to talk to people, I'll know how to sell. Versus like a clothing or a podcast, it's still that's still there, but it's not like the main thing that you're selling. Like if you're a web developer or a marketer or whatever, like in some ways you're kind of like testing what works on your clients. I wouldn't advocate like, make sure that I'm not saying to test random things on them. I'm just saying that like you're learning a lot and you're learning faster than you could on your own with your own thing because you have so many more reps to like try things. So that's another reason that I would say I probably landed on as well.
One thing, you mentioned that you had been doing your own podcast and been kind of a history of content creation. I assume, is that mainly through video?
I love video, man. I just made a post about it today. Like I can't stand text. I mean, I obviously like I read when I have to read, but like I don't want to be reading walls of text and stuff like that. It's just not me. Like, and I'm not a terrible writer. But obviously with the advent of AI and everything like that, like that's skewed that
Yeah.
perspective for me until like they can, people can make like AI which might be soon
Already.
with like
No,
Sora.
there's like,
Like
yeah.
I'm worried there a little bit, but I mean like until we can get to that point, like I just still think that video is so impactful because it can be passive if it's like a podcast. You could still just, if you have YouTube Premium, you turn the phone off or whatever, it's on a podcast platform. Like voice and video are so much better than text. So much gets lost in text translation. I mean, if it's less opinionated and it's just fact, then that's fine. But it's always been video. I've tried to blog a little bit before, never really have. But yeah, I mean, like I personally love video and even more specifically live video, like live streaming. I during the pandemic COVID times, like I was in my parents' house in my room and I was like live streaming almost every night for like 200 days. And it was stupid. I mean, it was just me talking about my day and like what I had done. Occasionally some friends would pop in or
Yeah.
whatever and stuff. But it was literally me talking. And those videos, I don't think they're on my channel anymore because they're unlisted. But I mean, you get the idea. It was just me literally like a MJS daily recap is what I called it. And it was just me like either doing different things like for the businesses or from like the house at the time when we were renovating and all that. And it really, again, it was just reps. It was just me getting in front of the camera and doing all that. And that is the thing that personally I just love to do. And I think if a lot of people I know, a lot in your content, like people are like scared to get in front of the camera, honestly, like just do it. Like just go out in front of it, do it. You will get better over time, absolutely. And I'm gonna be honest, like when you're small, people aren't even gonna like. There's no reason if somebody criticizes what you when you're small, like they're an asshole. You know what I mean? Like don't even like just disregard it. Like so. I mean, I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. I know it's not necessarily for everyone, but I've loved video since I don't know since I turned on the camera, whenever that was.
Yeah. To your point about, people kind of shitting on people if they're not their best video self, day one or whatever. There's this great quote from Lewis Howes, I think, and it's something to the effect, I'm going to butcher it, but I love the quote, the concept of it, where it's people who are being successful in their business and life will never shit on people who are trying to be successful because they know how hard it is day one. And there's that amount of empathy. I love this idea of kind of getting the reps in and getting over this initial fear of being on camera, because this is really, I think, one of the largest reasons people either one don't start with a personal brand, or two stop with a personal brand is because they hate seeing themselves on camera and they just don't feel confident being on camera. You have a natural now, I'll say, I don't know, I want to kind of get into your past here, but it seems like you have a very natural, authentic vibe on camera, very kind of fluid thought. You're not like overthinking it and all that kind of stuff. This is kind of the stuff that people see and can trust and feel like, oh, I know you, is nothing, is not hiding anything. This is all great skills to have when you're launching a personal brand or running a personal brand. What was that like day one? Was that a natural thing for you where you just pressed record and it was just authentic and natural day one? Or as you talk about getting the reps in, is that something you had to practice and learn? And if so, kind of what were some of the lessons learned along the way where were you seeing yourself and you're like, that's not me, and you kind of force yourself to be a different way?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a really important point. I think I tweeted something recently, like in a world that's becoming increasingly artificial, it's more important than ever to be authentic and like real as fuck. That just comes from like a, like a background of, again, Gary V content at the very beginning, and I just really love that. I when I was super young and even more impressionable than I am now, like, and I was trying to take all that in like a sponge, like I was seeing guys like Gary V and I was thinking, this guy has had success and it looks like the way he got there was just being himself. Like he just did what he did. Like he's a dude from New Jersey. The videos where he talks about why he swears, just as an example, like when that was like, it's kind of like off-putting to some and certain things. Like it's just who he is. Like it's the way he was, whatever. And you can like that, you can hate that, you can like, just like you can like or hate any other thing about somebody else. But like there's a certain thing. This was the realization I think I came to, is like, if somebody's not going to like me, I want them to not like me for me. I don't want them to not like this facade that I'm putting up, because now it's like, it's weird. It's like, you don't like somebody that I'm not even,
Right.
because I'm playing a character or I'm doing this weird stuff. So I try to be authentic and this is the other thing too, is just like kind of comes back to just simple honesty and like not lying. Obviously there's reasons to be a character in certain instances, right? But I'm saying, like, if you're just your personal brand stuff, like if you, it is way harder, in my opinion, from my experience, to keep up like a lie or like in the facade than it is to just be yourself. Like, you know what I mean? Like you always just default back to who you are. It is so much harder to like try to consistently be like, okay, how would I react if I was playing this character or whatever, rather than just like, this is what I think. And the last point I want to make on this, because I think this does get not talked about as much as I think, is when you're being authentic, the beauty of that is if you're an actual human and you talk like an actual human and you're like, and you realize that we all make mistakes, you can change your opinions as well. Like you can have like, I might think today WordPress is the best thing ever, as an example, and then in 2 years be like, well, I said that back then, but I'm going to tell you why my views changed. And then you can have another thing, and it's like you're just, it's natural. It's literally human
Mm.
behavior to change our minds and to grow and to expand and whatever. And yeah, so I think, again, to answer the question directly, it wasn't, I want to say it was, I don't know if it was completely natural. It might have been, but I think it was a lot of just like watching other people and being like, I really resonate with the people that are just themselves, rather than the people that are putting up some sort of facade or trying to fit into a certain mold.
Yeah, I think that's one of the core tenets of a personal brand. It's the contingency of a personal brand is authenticity, but it's so difficult for people to understand what is authentic for them, especially when I think people come into social media and their public persona with this fear of being themselves because they don't want to feel exposed. And so they start looking towards, okay, what is working for other people? Who are the top influencers in my space or just on social media in general? And let me try to dissect what I think is working for them. And those people have kind of natural, they're being authentic, but what's authentic to them is kind of like a certain setting in terms of vibe, right? So maybe they're just more high energy. Maybe they have a better inflection in the way they speak. Maybe their facial expressions. It's just kind of like that vibe works for them and that's authentic to them. And then they attract those types of people. And so they go, a new person coming in goes, oh, that's working for them. Let me change my default settings to meet theirs. And so then I can mimic their persona and then hopefully mimic their success. And I think that's where that kind of like imposter syndrome comes in, and also that facade that you're talking about, where we have to maintain that in order to, continue to look like we're an authority and all that kind of stuff. when in actuality, like people, it does the opposite effect. People see that you're being inauthentic because there's that friction between the natural you and the forced performance that you're putting on in order to try to be that other person. And so like the performance ends up leaking through the camera and people go, okay, this person isn't authentic. And it ends up backfiring on you because you're not actually showing up as yourself. And so you're not capturing that same energy that your favorite creators are getting. So it's such a like double-edged sword of people coming in wanting to be authentic but actually doing the complete opposite in order to try to be authentic. So it's definitely difficult, but I think I love the concept that you've gotten in the reps, and over time you kind of like figure out what authentic means for you. And I don't think people are naturally able just to kind of like press record and all of a sudden start feeling like you're your true self. One thing I want to jump into was this. So you're on YouTube right now, and I checked, and you've got a good following on there, about like 3,600 followers since I last checked, and that seems to be kind of like your main channel for content. I think that you kind of put most time into, which is more of like a long form content. But you also are posting like short form content, reels, TikToks. So you kind of, on every platform got some decent content going, and consistently. What would you say is kind of your main effort right now, your main focus in terms of content creation?
Yeah, so YouTube is, I just feel like one of the greatest platforms to really like lean into because it's, basically an extension of Google. And some of that is personal bias, but some of it is just reality. Anytime I have a problem, most of the time, if it's like a visual, like I need to see something, I'm probably going to go to YouTube rather than Google. Obviously, again, they're kind of conjoined, but the what that kind of, I guess, subconsciously taught me and what I learned from others is that if you are going to show anybody anything, then there's a conversation to be had whether it should be long or short form. But the point being, if people are going to search for your content, then YouTube is normally the way to go. Now, again, some people like my wife are like searching for things on TikTok now, which I find crazy because I haven't done that. But obviously that still works. So I would say to YouTube is my kind of my favorite, just based off of all the analytics it gives you, kind of the minute amount of success that I've kind of had over the years. I just know the platform in and out because I'm a consumer of it and a creator on it. And then the other platforms, I do think, like if you were just starting out, if somebody's starting out watching the podcast and they're like asking, like, hey, how should I start a personal brand? I started when I started the personal brand stuff, I was like, I need to be on every platform. I need to have like all this stuff. And there is a reason to kind of have like, if you want to do this long term, I always think like I love personal branding because I'm never gonna, I don't plan on changing my name. Like I'm gonna be the same person forever. I might have multiple businesses, but I'm gonna be the same person.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a argument to be made to like set everything up, with good usernames and all that. Like I love that little consistency piece of everything. But my point is that if you try to post on every single platform like all the time, that is kind of not scalable a lot of times because it's just you're posting on a bunch of different things. It's the same concept of being spread out. So I would try to pick one. YouTube would be a big one if you do like video, if you're natural on it, if you're in a niche where people are going to be searching for things. I mean, I've just gotten so many like people and views and everything like that from people literally searching for the types of content that I have. And then if you can couple that with getting suggested in the algorithm as well on certain topics, high level overview, but it tends to make for a pretty successful YouTube channel as you continue to grow. And I've seen, other examples of that. But yeah, I mean, YouTube's probably the one that I'm the most active on. Twitter X is pretty big now, getting bigger in just because of the people that I'm kind of intertwined with. I'm talking a lot about WordPress. I'm talking to other people in the space. And Facebook is weirdly large, at least in my opinion, because there's so many like groups of other developers and agency owners that I'm in there all the time. So that's a big one. But Instagram, it does, like, there is a way to use Instagram, but not necessarily for the things that I'm trying to do right now. TikTok, the same way. If I have a short form video, vertical video, I'll put it on there. But yeah, I mean, overall, The only thing I would say is, in my particular case, I sometimes try to reach two audiences, which is difficult and not necessarily advisable. You have people that want to build a website for themselves, or need a website, versus people that want to build an agency and build multiple websites. So those are two vastly different audiences. And again, if you're talking personal brand or your general brand, you should really have an idea of who you're trying to reach, because that will affect that as well. But for me, those are the ones that I tend to use the most.
Yeah, that's the interesting point here. I think is especially when it comes to website development is if you're creating educational content about like how to, if it's a little bit too high level, I think you're starting to speak to other people in your profession, other yous that want to
Mm-hmm.
have a quick way to figure out what you're doing. But if you speak kind of low level stuff like how to launch a WordPress website, you're tapping more like 101 stuff, which is I think more of the audience that'll be your client, because if those are people who are trying to do it on their own and then maybe stumble onto your content and go, oh, why don't I just use this guy? He knows what he's doing. He's teaching me how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is always
Yeah.
kind of an interesting area when it comes to educational content, where if you kind of have to catch this right area where it's either you're catering to just other people who are doing what you're doing, or do you want to try to catch your client? And so that's where I think people end up creating a lot of educational content that caters to other people who are doing what they're doing, and then they end up just creating info products or courses of
Mm-hmm.
how to become a website developer instead of
Mm-hmm.
getting leads or clients for their website development company. Have you seen any of that, or like is there a channel or a type of content that's been driving attention from new client opportunities versus those who are like, hey man, I'm also a website developer, can you help me like crack this code thing that I've been trying to do?
So with the type of content that I've done within the last 6 months, where I've like really ramped up more of YouTube content specifically to like about WordPress. And I like to say at this point, it's like some of it is WordPress news, some of it is WordPress technical tutorials, and some of it is like just the business of WordPress. So I'm still working on kind of like fine tuning that even, but I'm much more refined than I was, a year or two ago. But to answer your question, the this is the trend that I've seen talking to a lot of different people in this space that were either agency owners at one point or product developers and things like that. Now, the way that I see the general trajectory go in specifically WordPress and maybe just the web development industry as a whole is that everybody starts as an agency generally, because they want to help clients. Like they know, oh, I can build websites. They figure out how to build websites. Like, okay, well, how do I monetize this? Well, I build websites for other people that don't know how to build websites. Makes sense. So that's what I've done. So then you make money from that. And then quickly you realize working directly with clients is not always the absolute best thing in the entire world. And nothing against the clients. It's a lot of times it's actually like on the agency, because you're not, you're too busy in the business rather than on the business, and you're not scaling. So it's just like, there's not enough going on. You're trying to do a lot and you don't have the processes in order, especially it's difficult to get all that done. So at some point, I'm literally like 9 out of 10 people that I've talked to that are further along in their journey, they had an agency and they realized this is not what I want to do. Some people don't do this, but 9 out of 10, this is not what I want to do. I need to go a different route that's away from like one-on-one client work in a sense. And that ends up either manifesting in a product, right? Like some sort of SaaS product, or maybe like another service type thing that's not directly client. Maybe it's like some other productized service thing, or like you said, like an info product. And that one's always interesting because I've seen multiple really different ways to like come up with that model there. I've actually seen very recently people that package up what they do at their agency and they sell it as a course to the people that they were selling the websites to. So they're selling like, 500, whatever, amount of dollars for like a course and maybe a community or whatever. But the audience is not the other web developers. It's actually the baker, the concrete person, like whatever it is. That's an interesting model that I could talk about for days. Cause like I like there's so much, it's an interesting sell, I guess, the way that you have to sell that to those people. Cause like I have a preconceived notion that those people not necessarily shouldn't be building their websites, but they could be spending their time, in their business and operating that. Like, why would we let the web developer should be doing that. The web designer should be doing that. But that aside, that's one way that I've seen it, the cat, skinned. And the other way that I've seen it is that you do what you said. Like I know how to build websites. I built a semi-successful agency. I'm going to put content out that I wish I would have had. And I'm going to direct that at other web developers that are coming up. Like a little bit, I've learned from a lot of people above me. I'm here. I'm going to, to the people below me, just the people coming up. And that's going to resonate with them. And the way you monetize that, which is something I'm kind of exploring to this point, is like either consulting with them, or maybe it's a course, maybe it's a coaching thing, or maybe it's just content and like template, like things that you wish you would have had, like just like, hey, here's our contract, here's our proposal, like just go do this. Or affiliate marketing too. I mean, everybody wants to know what tools everybody's using nowadays, right? So there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I've definitely ran the gamut because I've done a lot of market research and I'm trying to do it for myself now as well. But you have to make that decision because, like you said, if you're saying valuable content to the wrong people, you're probably not going to make any, you're not going to be able to monetize that because you're not speaking to the right people.
Mm-hmm. I guess that's kind of an area too that I want to dive into, is this idea of coming up with content topics and knowing who to speak to and what you want to say in your content. So you mentioned a few different kind of pillars that you're focused on right now, like news, how-to content, community, what's going on, the happenings of WordPress. Do you have kind of a content strategy right now in terms of like, I need to create X amount of these pieces of content, and I have schedules where I post on these days? How much of the content strategy is there, and how much of it is maybe just kind of like, this sounds like a good idea, and I'm passionate about this concept, let me just wrap on a video real quick and publish that? Where's kind of your inspiration, your muse for content ideas? And then what's kind of your content process too, of recording content, editing? What tools are you using? What's kind of that soup to nuts for you?
Yeah, so I could have a better content strategy. I mean, I guess everything could be improved, I guess, but I could have a better content strategy. What I tried to do for a little bit was, I have a ton of ideas like in my head and then also now on paper. So that's, at least I feel like step one, is just anytime you have a decent idea that you think may turn into something, write it down, or at least maybe like if it's a quick idea, like, tweet it out or something. Because what I've been doing very recently is, I would say, again, the news, the how-tos, and the business side. So that is very predominantly aimed at people in the WordPress space, not like clients. Like a lot of the stuff that I've done right now is like, if I'm getting any leads from it, it's because they're just associating me with websites. They're not like seeing content that I put up that's like, 10 ways to improve your website. And then, like it's directed at them. I'm dabbling a little bit more with that in the coming, weeks here, but more so it's directed at people that are already in here, web developers, agency owners, whatever, and making those connections. So the content that I'm creating, a lot of it has really, as I've dove more into the WordPress community and understood what like an open source project looks like, and like the ins and outs and all of that. And I have this, a recent video that I made was to illustrate this would be why you should care about WordPress like news. If you're in WordPress, not just some random person necessarily, but like if you're building a top of a platform like WordPress, you should at least care about where it's going, because it's your whole business that you're building off of this. And if it decides to make a right turn when you're expecting it to make a left turn, then that could be potentially bad for you and your business and your customers. So just those types of things I'm trying to get people to think a little differently on from that business avenue as it, intersects with the technology. So that's kind of been, the MO like recently for how I've gotten those ideas. And a lot of the other ones is just things that I'm doing. Like, for instance, I'm rebuilding a client portal. Like, I built a custom client portal in WordPress, and everybody was asking me, like, I made a quick video about like how I did it, and everybody's asking me to make a step-by-step thing. So now I have a whole series of that. So I would say mainly, things that I'm seeing and consuming and then have ideas on. I love reacting to things. Like, I have opinions all the time. So like, that's a lot of where it comes from. And then the other big thing is like viewer requests, because if your audience that is watching your videos is asking you for something and they want information on it, then, possibly appease them. Maybe not necessarily one-offs, but a lot of times that might make sense if enough people ask for it. And then as far as the actual strategy, could be a little better. I try to do like consistently. The thing that I do consistently is I go live every Thursday at 11 a.m. That's been fantastic. Really love that. And doing a consistent live is like I would highly recommend that, because people they know to tune in, and it starts to go way up as far as like, relatively your engagement and everything. Videos at least once a week, most likely more though, but I don't really have a set schedule or anything, because a lot of it is kind of just asynchronous as far as I'm thinking about it. So I could be a little better there, but I'm not a full-time YouTuber just yet. So we're trying to navigate that. And then just as far as the tools go, I mean, I have like a ton of lists, and it's going to be on the website here as I release it, but just high level, I'm literally using like Streamlabs OBS a lot of times to record my videos, just because it's what I've been using for a long time. I recently switched to Restream for the actual live stuff, which is a good one if you're on PC. There's Ecamm, there's a ton of other ones if you're on Mac and everything like that. I didn't say this earlier, I don't hate editing, but I would rather not edit. So that's why I love live. And that's why I love just kind of press record and just record something and then end the recording and then upload it. You could do a lot more, especially if you're doing short form content, because you want to be more engaging and all that. But until I start hiring somebody to do that stuff, I'm probably not going to be, doing, wonderful videos like you, Dave. So like, I know it's easy because I've watched your videos on CapCut, but I don't, but it's just not something that like, I just want to necessarily do right now. So,
No, I mean,
but yeah,
the editing part is the biggest pain in the ass. So yeah, it is like,
yeah.
that metaphorical iceberg. It is definitely like the big old butt below the surface.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. So that's kind of the setup I got going on.
That's the other thing too, is when we talk about people being confident in being on video, they want things to look and sound perfect because, again, they're trying to kind of curate the best version of themselves, or in some cases, a version of someone else that they're trying to be themselves. And so this idea of like going live or just pressing record and then rapping on a topic can be pretty scary, because if you don't feel like you're fully prepared with like a script or whatever you might need for it to be perfectly curated, you don't want to look less than or stupid or whatever. So the idea of you kind of going live and then just being able to say like whatever comes, and again, this is me, I'm just rapping on this idea. Or I've seen kind of your videos where you are speaking to a topic, and some top with the how-to content, obviously there's a narrative there because you're literally going through a sequence of something. But then other times it's more like news content where you're like, hey, you're a journalist, like, hey, here's what's going on, here's my opinion on it. Do you have any preparation for these things, like lives and those types of videos? Like, do you bullet point anything out? Do you have like key talking points you want to make sure you get to? Like, is there prep for those types of videos? And then how do you kind of weave through that where you still feel you're coming across authentic, and you're also just like leaving room for different thoughts and things to be injected into it without it feeling too scripted and formatted?
Yeah, this is a great question. Yeah, I don't think I've ever filmed a video where I had like a full script written out. To my knowledge, I don't think I ever have, just because that's, I don't know, not my personality, and sometimes it doesn't really fit exactly the content that I'm doing. Sometimes it would. A lot of times, if I'm doing a technical tutorial, you have to kind of know how to do it. Obviously you have to know how to do it. You should have some steps maybe like written. A lot of times I will have like bullet points off to the side just on things I want to talk about, especially in the live streams recently, because there's a lot of stuff that's happening and I don't want to forget anything. So like I'll have a list of just like, hey, I want to hit these topics, we'll talk about them, and I'll kind of just riff on them. There's a couple things though, because I don't know if everyone can do that. I'm not saying I'm special. I'm just saying like, I don't know if everyone can do the whole riffing thing, because there's really, I'll tell you a quick story and I'll tell you, but like ultimately the reason is because you have to know the stuff. You have to know the stuff pretty well. You have to be extremely like open to being wrong in a sense. You have to almost like default to like skepticism or questioning a lot of the times. And I feel like that's just something that's natural about my personality, is I always want to like try to dig more to the bottom. And I have these ideas, like, I don't know if it just flows quicker. Like, I don't know, but like, I'm always just thinking like that. So the videos don't come out as perfect. A lot of times I'm probably rambling and saying things different ways, but it's not pristine, and they probably go longer than they do. Something I might refine over time for sure. But at the end of the day, it still does speak to that authenticity. So I think it's a net positive to a degree, but could be improved. The funny story that I want to tell you though, because I think it really resonate, it probably will resonate with a lot of people, is I was in college. We always used to do, like, in grade school and stuff, like you would do presentations and you'd have to go up to the front of the room and you'd have to talk about something that you do not give one shred of a shit about because you're a little kid and you're talking about some sort of weird historical event or person or something like that most of the time, right? Unless you're, brainiac at that point, which I was not. I had decent grades, but I didn't care about those types of things. So my point is, I was in college one time with my buddy and we had to give this presentation. I remember having like a note card and I didn't know a thing about what we were talking about. It was like the worst thing ever. And if you're younger and you're watching a podcast like this or watching content and you think I can't talk like that, I I think you're being a little short-sighted. And the reason is because I guarantee you there are things in your life that you could talk about, right? Maybe people like playing video games or something. They could talk literally on a stage for hours about, like, maybe the stage fright thing is a situation, but I'm saying, like, you could just turn on a camera and talk for hours about, oh, how I, know how to do all this stuff in this map and all this other stuff or whatever, it's video game or some other topic. My point is that is the real key, is if you're passionate about the thing and you know it just because you like it, it doesn't matter what the topic is. I guarantee you, it's not that you can't speak on it or you can't develop a brand around it or whatever. It's just the fact that you haven't found that thing or you just haven't made that connection yet. So my point is that don't let those early experiences of talking about random stuff that you didn't care about, like, misconstrue your idea of being like, oh, I need to have all these fancy things, or like I need to be like really good on camera. If you're talking about something you know and you care about, I think you're going to be way better off than you think you are.
100%. And I think the passion, the experience, like lived experience, drives confidence, which drives the authenticity. And you can
Mm-hmm.
see that when you're talking about it too. Like if you're in a conversation with someone, it's like when you go to like a dinner party and you're trying to like spark conversations with someone and you keep asking them things like, what do you do for work, or what, the weather or whatever, but then you say like, um you know, are you a Marvel fan or whatever? And they go, yes. Did you see the last Thor movie? Whatever. And you can see like the passion that
Right.
drives in their face, like, and then they can rap on that and just have all these tidbits and all this stuff. There's such a difference between topics that they don't care about and topics that they're truly passionate about, and how all of a sudden they could talk for days in just an excited way. And you can see, like, when you talk about authenticity is driven by something that we don't control. Like it's a core, our innate settings that are like taking over the control of our facial expressions and what we like to talk about and like our reaction to things. And you can't fake that. So like, yeah, if you truly are passionate about something, like things just flow naturally. Thoughts come naturally. You make connections between ideas more naturally. So I think in your case, you have such a history of WordPress and lived experiences through it. And so when certain things happen or you're trying to describe something, it's not work to you. Like it's like you're showing up talking about the thing you're already excited to talk about, and there's just already so much to connect that it's just easy and for you to kind of flow with ideas. So yeah, I think the idea of like, I think that's where it's difficult for those who maybe are trying to launch a personal brand off of like their work, something that it's like, yeah, I'm a salesperson, so yeah, I'm a sales agent or something, and this is just kind of like what I have to do to make ends meet, but I'm trying to show up with a personal brand to try to make more sales, and it's not something that they truly care about, but it's something they have to do. It's homework versus like a passion thing. Yeah, that's where it's a little bit more difficult to show up every day because it's just not something you actually. So I do think like passion is one thing in terms of having a successful personal brand, because the way you show up is more authentic and you are able to craft ideas more easily, but also it's just because you're able to stick with it longer. If you were going to be talking about this shit regardless of whether you had a personal brand or not, then you might as well press record and have people like join in on the conversation. You know what I mean? So there is that kind of like ikigai concept of like what people will pay you for and what you're passionate about and what the world needs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
There's one point that I want to make, because I think that a lot of people have probably had this feeling, but maybe not been able to like verbalize it mentally, is that when I talked about earlier, watching Gary Vee and all that sort of stuff, that was around the time that like I had a job and I was thinking, oh, well, I went to school, I have a job. I don't know the first thing necessarily about entrepreneurship, but I'm learning through osmosis, like through YouTube videos and things like that. And then when you start to dabble, you're like, well, can I continue to get into it? The thing that I have said many times, I've actually gone, this has been a cyclical thing in my life. There was a time where I was heavily, it was around when I was first getting out of college, learning how to like manage money way better than I did before and everything. I watched hours and hours and hours of like Dave Ramsey, Graham Stephan, Beat the Bush, like all these other like random, that was my main genre on YouTube, was finance, right? So just watching all this stuff. There comes a time, I feel like, where when you go from a beginner, there's probably a name for this, but I haven't looked it up. When you go from a beginner, like you have no knowledge on anything and you watch so much and you get so saturated with that content, you go from like knowing nothing to knowing like above average, probably like the not, like 80, 90th percentile. You don't know everything. You're not a complete expert, but you know a lot more than you did when you started. And then when you get to that point with me, with finance, it was like, I don't want to watch any more finance content. Like I'm saturated with the finance content. I'm not an expert, but I know what I need to know, and I will come back when as needed. So that was like it was almost like a phase of my life. I'm saying this because that plus the other phases, whether it's like, technical, political, whatever it is, you get like saturated, and then you're like, if it makes sense for you and you're really passionate about it, if you're not those things, then maybe it's okay, fine, I'm moving on to the next thing. But if you are passionate about it, I've said this statement out loud many times. I am so tired of watching, I need to start talking. So it's like when you can only, I feel like I can only consume so much before I can actually contribute to the conversation. Like before I'm like, okay, screw this, I'm starting to contribute now. And that's majorly what happened in the WordPress space for me too, is like I have too many thoughts that I have not actually verbalized. And your options are, oh, I can tweet this, or I can like comment in the video, which is like fine, but like it's not going to create anything for you. It's just going to add to the conversation. But I'm saying if you have that many thoughts, do it for yourself. Do it in your own personal brand. Do it in another brand. Start a website for something else. Like that's what I mean. Is like you can only listen for so long and consume until you. A lot of times, at least for me, I have to start talking because it's just like I've done enough listening. I have to give some opinion. Everybody else is talking. Why not me?
I love that. I
So,
love that so much. And I I want to give credit to whomever I got this from. It may have been Dan Coe, but there was this idea of like fat brain versus skinny brain. And it's the idea that like we consume so much information. It's like consuming food, right? And if you just consume, you're creating a fat brain. And we don't want a fat brain. We want a fit, in shape, skinnier brain. And the way to make a skinnier brain is to actually do. And like, in your case is, create content, join the conversation, start talking about what you're learning. So you have to apply the information that you're learning. And I think that's one thing. It's safe to consume because, you can't be judged by anything. You can't put out content that people are going to, belittle or whatever. But so people kind of stop and they think, oh, I just need more strategy. I need to like learn more. I need to like, I don't feel as confident enough. But like you're saying, if you consume 2 to 3 months worth of beginner content, you will know more than like 90% of the people that are out there. But at that point, you're reaching this like threshold, whatever this name is for that point, where like your brain is just too fat. Like you need to start losing some brain weight by actually applying the things that you're learning and doing and stuff like that. So yeah, 100% in terms of like that's the boiling point of kind of like your educational journey is either one, start applying content creation yourself, or start applying what you're learning in real life. So like if you're learning about real estate, go actually buy a rental property or something at that point. Like you don't need any more education at that point, or start creating educational content around real estate. So I really love that concept.
yeah, 100%.
Cool, Mark. This has been awesome. We learned a lot about how to create content for YouTube, how to show up authentically, how to have an idea of where you're going, but not be too scripted to the point where you lose yourself in, on all of that. And really how to find your niche and kind of take that hard decision when you are multi-passionate, kind of that niche equation of, you know, what's kind of working for you at the time, and maybe just lean into that. And then over time we can branch ourselves out and kind of flex some of those other passions. So before we leave, I want to do a quick lightning round of some questions.
Okay,
So put you on the
let's
spot
do
here,
it.
the hot seat. Nothing too crazy, so don't worry.
Mm.
So think back. So you've been creating content for a while, but think back to kind of day one you, the day that you pressed record on the camera for the first time, and you started your content creation journey. I know you've always been passionate about content creation, but you know, I'm sure you've learned so much along the way. If you could time travel back to that day one you, what would be the number one piece of advice you would give yourself on day one?
I mean, I've kind of done this, but I would say like don't stop. Like, I mean, honestly, it would probably just be a lot of the stuff that we were talking about. Like, don't worry about what other people think. I think I've probably done a good job of it, but I think that that's probably be yourself. Don't worry about what other people think. Um, I I know I'm trying to keep it concise, but the main thing that I would say that I still possibly struggle with, and I know a lot of other people is will as well. Don't worry about knowing where you're absolutely going. Like, have a goal, but just keep going. Like, just keep going. Really, is it'll work out as long as you're trying and always trying to get better. There's no reason to doubt that you'll get to where you want to go.
Awesome. And if people wanted to learn more about you and your business, where should they go?
Yeah, so if you just type in mjs.bio, that's kind of like a landing page, like kind of like a link tree thing that I built. That has, like, you know, my personal brand on there, my agency, all my social links. You can subscribe to my mailing list if you want. There's gonna be, you know, content coming there as well. So working on a new website, it'll be there. You'll see it.
Love it. I appreciate it, Mark. Thank you for the time today, man.
Dave, thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it.